The mansion was huge, shining like a palace on the top of the private hill. Expensive cars were lined up in the driveway, fountains poured clear water, and guards stood at every gate. People in the city talked about the tycoon who owned it. They said he was powerful, talented, respected, and rich enough to buy anything he wanted. But inside the mansion, behind the tall doors and glittering chandeliers, there was one thing he could not buy: his son's success in school. The boy sat at his large wooden study table every morning with books opened in front of him, but his eyes looked lost. He tried to read, but the words danced and moved. He tried to write answers, but his hands trembled. He tried to think, but his mind felt heavy and slow. Every test came back the same way. Failed. 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 His father could not understand how a boy born into wealth, given the best materials, fed with the best food, surrounded by the best environment, could still be failing every subject. Teachers came to the mansion and left with hopeless expressions. Some said he was lazy. Some said he was distracted. Some said he simply did not care. But none of that was true. The boy cared more than anyone. He wanted to impress his father. He wanted to pass just once. He wanted someone to tell him he wasn't useless. But every mistake made him smaller. Every failed grade made his heart sink deeper. The mansion staff whispered about it while polishing floors and carrying silver trays. The cooks talked about it in the kitchen. The guards discussed it quietly when no one was around. Everyone knew the tycoon's son could not pass his tests. Everyone except one girl who never joined those conversations. She was the maid's daughter, and she moved quietly through the mansion like a shadow. She saw everything, heard everything, but spoke very little. She noticed things others did not. She saw how the boy rubbed his eyes after reading just one paragraph. She saw how he breathed faster when someone asked him a question. She saw how shame covered his face like a heavy blanket. While adults complained, she observed. While tutors scolded, she understood. While the father grew frustrated, she saw the fear hidden behind the boy's silence. The father walked through the mansion with loud footsteps, always wearing a serious expression. He believed discipline solved everything. He believed success only came through pressure and force. So he pushed harder. He told his son that failing was unacceptable. He said a tycoon's son must be the best. But the more he pushed, the worse the boy performed. The boy stopped sleeping properly. He sat awake at night, staring at his books, trying to make sense of the words. Sometimes, tears rolled down his face, but he wiped them away quickly before anyone could see. He didn't want pity. He wanted ability. Meanwhile, the maid's daughter watched from the doorway while her mother worked. She saw the boy struggle silently. She saw how lonely he felt even though he lived in the biggest house in the city. She saw that all the gold, all the marble, all the luxury meant nothing if the heart inside felt small. Sometimes, the boy walked through the garden alone, kicking pebbles, thinking about how the world saw him. People assumed he was lucky. People assumed he had everything. But he felt like he had nothing that truly mattered. The gardeners bowed to him. Drivers opened car doors for him. Servants rushed to bring him whatever he needed. But none of them could bring him success. None of them could bring him peace. None of them could help him understand why his brain did not work like other students. And every time he failed another test, his father's disappointment grew heavier, like a cloud that followed him everywhere. One afternoon, the boy stared at another test paper on his desk. Big red marks covered the page. His chest tightened. His breath shook. He felt like the world was closing in. At that moment, he noticed someone standing quietly near the open doorway. It was the maid's daughter, holding a basket of folded laundry. Their eyes met for just a second, and she looked away politely. But in that small moment, something unusual happened. Someone had seen him. Not the rich boy. Not the failing student. Not the embarrassment of a tycoon. She had seen the human inside. She did not laugh. She did not smirk. She did not judge. She simply understood. And even though not a single word was spoken between them yet, something began to shift. The story of the struggling boy did not end in that moment. But it was the moment where the path quietly changed direction. The mansion was still grand. The boy was still failing. The father was still frustrated. The staff was still whispering. But for the first time, someone who mattered noticed the truth hidden in silence. The next days in the mansion felt heavier for the boy. His father hired another private tutor, a strict man with sharp glasses and a louder voice than necessary. The tutor spoke fast, pointed at the books, and expected the boy to understand instantly. But the boy's mind froze again. Letters blurred, numbers twisted, and panic crawled up his chest. The tutor sighed loudly and wrote a report saying the boy lacked discipline. The father grew red with anger when he read it. He believed money could fix anything, so he decided to spend even more. He ordered new learning devices, expensive memory programs, and high-end educational tools. But none of them worked. The mansion filled with frustration. The boy felt like a failure in a place built to show perfection. The staff walked quietly to avoid the tycoon's temper. Even the air felt tense. During all this, the maid's daughter continued moving silently through the mansion. She carried folded sheets, dusted corners, and helped her mother polish the silver. But she kept noticing the boy. She noticed how he avoided eye contact. She noticed how he held his pencil like it might break. She noticed how he flinched whenever someone mentioned studying. She had seen that look before in children who were scared of being wrong, not scared of learning. She remembered school, where she herself was often ignored because she was quiet and from a poor family. But she learned quickly because she paid attention in her own way. She saw patterns. She saw emotions. She saw what others missed. One evening, the boy sat in the huge study room while his father paced behind him. The father ordered him to solve a page of questions. The boy tried. His hand shook. His mind went blank. The father's voice filled with disappointment. The boy felt like shrinking into his chair. At that moment, the maid entered to collect empty teacups, and her daughter followed to help. The girl saw the boy's trembling hand and the red marks on the paper. The father left the room angrily, and the tutor closed his books, preparing to leave as well. When the room became quiet, the girl looked at the boy gently and said only one soft sentence. "You don't have to be scared of the paper." The boy looked up, confused. No one had ever spoken to him like that. Not a tutor. Not a teacher. Not even his father. She picked up one of the pages and placed it on the table in front of him. Then she slid a pencil toward him. Her voice was calm, not commanding. "Try to tell the answer like a story," she said. The boy blinked. A story? No one had ever said that before. The tutors always demanded rules, formulas, fast responses. But she spoke differently. The boy hesitated, then tried. He explained the question out loud, slowly, like telling a simple tale. For the first time, he understood the problem. His eyes widened in surprise. The girl smiled a little, not proud, just encouraging. She whispered, "You learn by seeing, not by memorizing." Those words felt like a key turning in a locked door inside his mind. Their moment ended quickly when footsteps approached. The girl returned to her mother, and the boy pretended nothing happened. But inside, his heart felt lighter. He had understood something. Not the schoolwork, but himself. He wasn't stupid. He just learned differently. The next morning at breakfast, the father spoke sternly about arranging yet another tutor. The boy lowered his eyes, but secretly his thoughts drifted to the maid's daughter's words. Later that day, when he passed the hallway, he saw her again, helping her mother fold towels. She did not speak, but their eyes met, and this time the boy didn't look away. Something unspoken passed between them. A quiet understanding. A hidden connection. For the first time, he felt seen. For the first time, he felt hope. Little did he know that this small moment would grow into something much bigger. He did not know that the girl's quiet voice would soon change everything. He did not know that the secret she carried would open a door that every tutor had failed to unlock. And he certainly did not know that this unlikely connection would reshape not just his education, but his future, his confidence, and the way the entire mansion saw him. Days passed, and the boy found himself thinking more and more about the maid's daughter. He remembered the calm way she spoke, the gentleness in her eyes, and how she didn't treat him like someone broken. No one else in the mansion ever spoke to him as if he mattered beyond his failures. Tutors saw him as a problem to fix. His father saw him as a disappointment to hide. The staff saw him as gossip to whisper about. But the maid's daughter had seen something different. That thought stayed with him like a small flame glowing quietly in a dark room. One afternoon, while the mansion buzzed with preparations for a business dinner, the boy slipped away to the small side yard near the laundry line. It was the only place where people rarely went. There, under the shade of a tree, he found the maid's daughter hanging sheets to dry. She noticed him but didn't jump or hurry away. She simply continued working, letting him choose whether to speak or leave. The boy swallowed nervously and asked if she could show him again how to understand the questions like a story. She nodded gently and sat on the stone steps, inviting him to sit nearby. There were no fancy desks, no pressure, no heavy expectations. She drew shapes with a small piece of chalk on the ground, turning a math problem into a picture. The boy watched, and for the first time, numbers made sense. He didn't feel stupid. He didn't feel slow. He felt capable. They continued in small moments like that, 5 minutes in the kitchen, 10 minutes in the garden, a short explanation while she helped her mother fold napkins. Each time, she showed him a new way to learn. She used colors, stories, movements, and simple steps. The boy found himself improving without even realizing it. His heart felt lighter, and he no longer woke up afraid of books. But they kept their moments secret. The girl did not want her mother punished for being distracted from her duties. The boy did not want his father to take away the only person who had ever helped him learn without pain. One morning, during class at school, the teacher handed out a surprise quiz. Normally, the boy's heart would race and his palms would sweat. But this time, he remembered the girl's calm voice. See the story. Not the fear. He took a deep breath and worked slowly, imagining the problems the way she had shown him. When the teacher collected the papers, the boy didn't feel defeated. He felt steady. The next day, when the results came back, something unbelievable happened. He had passed. Not barely. Not accidentally. A clear, confident pass. His classmates stared in disbelief. Some whispered that it must be a mistake. Others looked annoyed that the rich dumb boy had improved. The teacher raised an eyebrow but smiled softly, surprised yet pleased. But the biggest reaction came from the father. When the school report arrived at the mansion and showed a passing grade, the Tycoon froze. He stared at the paper like it was written in another language. For the first time, he didn't shout. He didn't criticize. He simply looked confused. The boy expected praise, but none came. Still, the boy didn't feel crushed this time. He knew the truth of how he succeeded. He knew someone believed in him. Someone who saw him as more than a disappointment. That evening, the boy walked into the kitchen while the maid's daughter was wiping the counter. He placed the graded paper in front of her. She looked at it, saw the score, and smiled, not a big smile, but a proud one. The boy felt warmth in his chest, something he had never felt after a test result. She didn't say, "Good job," in a loud or dramatic way. She simply said, "You did it because you understood, not because you memorized." He nodded, feeling taller than before. But their secret could not stay hidden forever. The more the boy improved, the more questions the father would ask. The mansion was full of eyes and ears. Someone would notice. Someone would talk. And when that happened, everything would change, whether for good or bad, neither of them knew yet. The news of the boy's unexpected improvement began spreading quietly through the mansion. The cooks whispered about it while chopping vegetables. The guards mentioned it in low voices at the gate. The cleaning staff exchanged surprised looks whenever the boy walked past. Nobody understood how a child who failed every exam suddenly passed a surprise quiz. Some said the school made a mistake. Others claimed the boy finally feared his father enough to try harder. Only one person knew the real reason, and she continued working silently, never taking credit, never seeking attention. The maid's daughter remained invisible, just as she always had been. But secrets in a mansion full of watching eyes never stay hidden for long. One afternoon, the head housekeeper saw the maid's daughter and the boy sitting near the service stairs with a book between them. They were not touching, not playing, not breaking any rules, but the housekeeper's eyes narrowed. She said nothing, yet her expression showed disapproval. The boy quickly stood up, his face turning red, and walked away with the book held tight against his chest. The girl lowered her eyes and continued folding towels. She knew that even being seen near him could cause problems. Not because she had done anything wrong, but because of who she was. A servant's child. A girl of a different class. A girl with a different skin color. A girl society ignored until it needed someone to blame. That evening, the boy sat in his room feeling restless. For the first time, studying did not scare him, but the idea of losing the only person who understood him did. He remembered how she had said he learned by seeing. He remembered how she turned problems into pictures. He remembered how she never laughed when he made mistakes. And he realized something important. He did not just learn from her. He trusted her. Something he had never felt with any tutor, teacher, or even his own father. The thought made him determined. He would not let anyone take this away from him. The next day at school, another test was announced for the end of the week. Normally, the boy would have panicked. But this time, he felt ready to learn more, and he needed her help again. When he returned home, he waited near the side garden where they had studied before. The girl arrived carrying laundry, and he gently asked if they could practice again. She hesitated, remembering the housekeeper's stare, but the boy looked at her with hopeful eyes. She nodded softly, and they sat behind the tall hedge where no one could see. She drew symbols on a small wooden board, turning the lesson into a simple story again. The boy repeated her steps, and the lesson flowed naturally. For a few peaceful minutes, the world felt kind. Then footsteps approached. The board almost slipped from the boy's hands. The girl quickly hid the chalk behind her skirt. A servant passed by without noticing them, but the moment left their hearts racing. The danger was growing. Still, neither of them stopped. The boy needed to learn, and the girl could not ignore someone who finally believed in himself. At dinner that night, the father spoke in a cold voice. He announced that a new elite tutor would arrive the next morning. The boy felt fear rush back into his chest. Another tutor meant pressure, shouting, and failure. But this time, he didn't feel helpless. He felt protective of the progress he had made. He said something he had never dared to say before. He looked up and spoke softly, "Tutors don't help me." The room fell silent. The father stared at him, stunned that his son had spoken without shaking. The boy continued, voice fragile but brave, "I learned differently." The father did not understand. He only frowned and said that excuses were unacceptable. The boy lowered his eyes, but inside, a new strength remained. Later that night, as the girl walked through the hallway with a basket of linens, the boy passed her and whispered, "Thank you." It was just two simple words, but they carried weight. No one had ever thanked her in this mansion. Not for her help. Not for her kindness. Not for her intelligence. Her eyes lifted in surprise. She didn't smile, but something warm flickered inside her. It was the first moment anyone in the mansion had spoken to her as if she mattered. But the housekeeper stood at the end of the hallway and saw the exchange. Her expression tightened. The winds in the mansion were changing, and soon, someone would demand answers. The boy and the maid's daughter didn't know it yet, but the truth was slowly moving toward the surface, and when it arrived, everything that felt safe would be tested. The next morning, the mansion was unusually quiet. The new elite tutor arrived in a black car with shiny briefcases and an expression that showed he believed he was smarter than everyone inside. The father welcomed him proudly, convinced that this expensive expert would finally fix his son. The boy sat at the long study table, his hands cold, his stomach tight. The tutor spoke quickly, explaining methods and rules the boy could not follow. The boy tried to understand, but the words felt heavy and confusing. Within minutes, the same old fear returned. His heartbeat raced, his throat tightened, and his mind shut down. The tutor frowned, annoyed. He said the boy lacked seriousness. The father glared with disappointment. The boy felt the familiar shame crawling back, swallowing the confidence he had slowly begun to build. When the lesson ended, the tutor left to meet the father privately. The boy slipped out of the study room and walked toward the lower hallway where the maid and her daughter worked. He didn't say anything, but the girl saw the redness in his eyes and understood. She waited until the hallway was empty, then quietly handed him a small folded piece of paper. He opened it when no one was watching. Inside was a drawing, a simple picture explaining the same lesson the tutor had tried to teach, but in a way the boy could understand. His chest warmed. She believed in him even when he couldn't believe in himself. That evening, the father called the boy into his office. The tutor had told him the boy was unteachable. The father's voice was cold, sharper than before. He said it was shameful for a tycoon's son to perform worse than ordinary students. The boy wanted to defend himself. He wanted to tell the truth. He wanted to say he wasn't stupid. But the words got stuck in his throat. He stood silently while his father lectured him, feeling smaller with every sentence. Meanwhile, in the servants' quarters, the housekeeper confronted the maid. She accused her daughter of distracting the boy. She claimed the girl had overstepped her place. The maid's face paled with fear. She knew any complaint could cost her job, and losing this job meant losing their home. She warned her daughter to stay away from the boy, to avoid even looking in his direction. The girl listened quietly, but her heart felt heavy. She didn't help the boy for reward. She helped him because she saw his pain, and she couldn't ignore it. The next day at school, another test was given. The boy used the drawing she had made for him, remembering the steps she had shown. He worked slowly, breathing the way she taught him. When the test was graded, he didn't just pass, he achieved one of the highest scores in the class. The teacher stared at him with disbelief and then with respect. Some classmates looked jealous. Some looked confused. And for the first time, the boy walked out of the classroom with his head lifted, not lowered. When he returned home, he searched for the maid's daughter, but she avoided him. She kept her eyes down, her steps quick. She was afraid of being seen. The boy didn't understand why she seemed distant, and the confusion hurt. Later, he overheard two staff members whispering. They said the housekeeper had reported the girl. They said the father wanted to know who had been teaching his son. The boy's heart dropped. He realized the girl was in trouble because of him. That night, he made a decision. For the first time in his life, he chose to be brave, not for a test, not for school, but for someone who had helped him when no one else did. He walked into the dining room where his father sat reviewing business papers. His voice trembled, but he spoke anyway. He told his father that the tutors did not help him. He told him that learning through pressure made him fail. And then, with a shaking breath, he admitted that the maid's daughter was the one who helped him understand. The room fell silent. The air felt frozen. The father stared at him, not believing what he had heard. A tycoon's son being taught by a servant's child. It challenged everything he believed about class, status, and intelligence. The boy waited, scared but standing his ground. This moment would decide everything, the girl's future, his future, and the truth finally being seen. The father did not speak for a long moment. His eyes remained fixed on his son, trying to decide whether he was lying, confused, or truly serious. The boy stood there with his hands shaking, but he did not look away. He finally said the words he had never dared to say before. He told his father that he learned differently, that pressure made his mind shut down, and that the girl had shown him a method that worked. The father slowly stood up from his chair, his face unreadable. He told the boy to bring the maid and her daughter to the dining hall immediately. Servants rushed through the mansion, and soon the maid and her daughter stood before the tycoon. The maid's hands trembled, afraid she was about to lose everything. The girl stood quietly beside her mother, showing no fear on her face, but her eyes revealed it. The father asked her directly if she had been teaching his son. She did not lie. She nodded once. She said she only helped because she saw the boy struggling and no one else understood him. Her voice was calm, respectful, but steady. The father stared at her, shocked not only by her confession but by the confidence in her voice. The boy stepped forward and said she should not be punished, that she was the only person who made him believe he could succeed. The father raised his hand, and the room went silent. He asked the girl how she had known what the boy needed. She explained softly that some people learn by seeing, not by memorizing. She explained that the boy was not slow, not lazy, not incapable. He simply learned differently. The father frowned. He had never heard anyone speak about learning that way. In his world, success was earned through force, competition, and fear. But here was a girl without wealth, education, or status, explaining something every expensive tutor had failed to understand. The father dismissed everyone except the girl. The maid tried to stay, but the father insisted she leave. The girl stood alone in front of the tycoon while he questioned her. He asked how she knew these things. She said she read books her mother brought home from donation boxes. She said she watched children at school and noticed patterns in how they learned. She said she paid attention to people, not just to instructions. Her intelligence was quiet but sharp, humble but powerful. The father was forced to face a truth he had never considered. His wealth, his influence, his elite connections had not helped his son. But this girl, invisible in his own house, had succeeded where everyone else had failed. Still, pride was a powerful wall, and he did not break it easily. He told the girl she was never to approach his son again unless he said otherwise. The girl bowed her head, obeying, though her heart felt heavy. The boy watched from the hallway, feeling helpless and desperate. The next days were tense. The father observed his son secretly. He watched how the boy hesitated when reading, how he touched objects to focus, how he whispered steps under his breath. For the first time, the father noticed something he had ignored his entire life. His son was not weak. He had simply been misunderstood. The father began to question his own beliefs. He remembered his own childhood, how he was forced to learn under strict rules, how failure meant punishment, how fear had shaped him. He had become successful, but he had never been happy. Was he repeating the same pain onto his son? At school, the boy took another test. This time, he passed again. The father received the report and stared at it for a long time. The improvement was real. The girl's method worked. The father walked through the mansion that evening and saw the girl in the hallway carrying laundry. She lowered her eyes, expecting anger, punishment, or dismissal. Instead, the father said her name softly, and she looked up. He asked her if she would agree to teach his son properly, not in secret, not in fear, but with permission. The maid gasped when she heard the news. The girl nodded slowly, still unsure if it was a trap. The boy heard the decision and felt something he had never felt in his life. Relief. Hope. Safety. The father walked away without saying more, but something had changed inside him. He did not admit it aloud, but he had been humbled. The mansion felt different now. Not lighter yet, but shifting. The boy and the girl were allowed to study together, and the staff watched with curiosity instead of suspicion. Some still whispered, but others began to see something new, the possibility that intelligence did not belong only to the rich. But change always brings consequences. And soon, the outside world would learn about the boy's transformation. When that happened, the reactions would not be gentle. The news of the boy's continued success began spreading beyond the mansion walls. At school, teachers started treating him differently. They called on him in class, expecting failure, but instead he answered with growing confidence. Some classmates were shocked, some annoyed, and some curious. They whispered that the tycoon must have bought the grades. Others whispered that the boy had been hiding his intelligence. But the truth was only known to two people, and they carried it quietly between them like a shared secret flame. The girl continued teaching him with patience, using drawings, stories, and gentle steps. The boy learned faster each day, not because he was suddenly smarter, but because someone finally understood how his mind worked. At home, the father watched the progress with mixed emotions. His pride wanted to claim credit, but his conscience whispered that the girl deserved acknowledgement. The father struggled to accept that a servant's daughter could do what experts could not. His world was built on status, hierarchy, and control. Yet every test score challenged those beliefs. The father began spending more time observing his son. He saw the boy sit straighter, speak clearer, and breathe without fear. He saw him smile while learning, something he had never seen before. The father's heart tightened, realizing how long his son had suffered under pressure he thought was necessary. One afternoon, the school held a parent meeting. The father attended, expecting polite conversations. Instead, the teachers praised the boy openly, saying his improvement was remarkable. They asked what method the tycoon had used. The father felt heat rise in his chest. He imagined admitting that a maid's daughter was responsible. His pride battled with the truth. In the end, he said nothing and walked away, carrying the weight of a secret that no longer felt comfortable. Meanwhile, the girl continued helping the boy in the mansion's library. They studied side by side while sunlight streamed through tall windows. Sometimes they talked about school. Sometimes they sat in silence, working peacefully. The boy found himself wanting to know more about her. He asked what she dreamed of becoming. She said she wanted to study, to learn, to grow, but she knew her position in life made those dreams impossible. The boy felt something twist in his chest. She had opened a door for him, yet her own doors were closed. He wished he could help her the way she helped him, but he did not yet know how. One evening, the father entered the library unexpectedly. The girl immediately stood and stepped back, ready to leave. The father looked at the work they had done together. Books, drawings, notes, and solved problems covered the table. He asked the boy a question from the lesson. The boy answered confidently. Then the father asked another, harder question. The boy answered again. The father felt something break inside him. He realized the truth fully and deeply. His son had never been incapable. He had simply been unseen. The father dismissed the boy and asked the girl to stay. She stood still, unsure of what was coming. The father told her he wanted to understand how she knew these methods. She explained again, quietly, that she learned by watching, by listening, by paying attention to how people struggled, not just what they were told to do. The father realized she possessed a natural intelligence that had never been nurtured because of her social position. He asked her what she wanted for her future. She hesitated, afraid to sound ungrateful, but finally said she wanted education, opportunity, and a life where her mind could grow. The father looked at her and saw something he had never noticed before. Potential. But change always creates ripples, and not everyone liked what they saw happening. Some staff believed the girl was stepping above her place. Some whispered that the boy was becoming too attached to her. Some said it was improper for a tycoon's son to learn from someone of her background. Rumors began to spread, not just within the mansion, but outside as well. Soon, people in social circles heard that the tycoon's brilliant son was being taught by a maid's daughter. The father received calls, messages, and subtle insults from other wealthy families. They mocked him, saying he was losing standards, losing dignity, losing control. The father felt humiliation pressing against him like a heavy weight. His pride, his reputation, his status, all felt threatened. The boy sensed the tension returning. The girl felt the change in the air. The mansion no longer felt safe for their quiet progress. Something was coming, something that would force a choice. The father would soon have to decide what mattered more, his image or the truth. The boy would have to stand up again, but this time for someone else. And the girl, who had changed a life in silence, would soon find her own future hanging in the balance. The pressure around the mansion grew stronger as days passed. The father received more remarks from wealthy businessmen, each one wrapped in polite words but filled with insult. They asked why his son was improving. They asked which elite academy he hired. They asked what expensive secret method he discovered. And when the father stayed silent, their smiles sharpened. Rumors began spreading that the tycoon had lost control of his household. Some even suggested that the boy's improvement was fake. The father felt his pride cracking under the weight of society's expectations. Yet every time he looked at his son, he saw a different truth. The boy no longer walked with fear. He no longer hid his eyes. He no longer shook when solving problems. The father saw growth, strength, and light that had never been there before. And deep inside, he knew who deserved the credit. Meanwhile, the girl continued helping the boy, though she sensed the storm building. She saw the father's conflicted expression. She saw staff whispering more boldly. She saw her mother worrying every night. But she also saw the boy's joy when he learned something new. She saw him laugh softly when he understood a lesson on the first try. She saw his confidence bloom like a flower finally given sunlight. She wondered if helping him had been worth the danger. And every time she saw him smile, she knew it had been. One afternoon, the school held a major examination, one that determined advancement and future placement. The boy entered the classroom with steady breath and calm eyes. He remembered her words, her drawings, her lessons, her kindness. He worked slowly and confidently. When the results were announced days later, he had earned one of the highest scores in the entire school. His name was posted at the top of the board. Students stared in disbelief. Teachers praised him openly. The school sent a letter to his father congratulating him. The boy carried a copy of the results home, eager to show the girl who made it possible. But when he arrived, the atmosphere in the mansion was tense. His father had called all the staff into the main hall. Whispers filled the room. Some feared firings. Some expected punishments. The girl stood beside her mother, quiet but composed. The boy entered with the paper in his hand, unsure what was happening. The father raised his voice and announced the school results to the entire staff. Gasps spread through the hall. The boy felt a rush of pride, but his eyes searched for the girl's reaction. She simply looked at him with a soft warmth, the kind that didn't need applause. Then, something unexpected happened. The father called the girl to step forward. The room stiffened. The boy's heart pounded, afraid the father would give in to society's pressure. But instead, the father spoke words no one imagined. He said the girl was the reason his son had succeeded. He said she had done what wealth could not. He said intelligence and ability did not belong to class, color, or status. The room fell silent in shock. The girl's mother covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. Staff who once whispered now stared with disbelief. The father continued. He announced that he would sponsor the girl's education. Not just books. Not just a small allowance. A full scholarship to the best school, the same level of opportunity his son had. The girl's eyes widened, her composure breaking for the first time. She had never imagined a future beyond service, beyond quiet corners, beyond being unseen. The boy stepped forward and stood beside her, not as a master, not as someone higher, but as an equal whose life she had changed. He handed her the test paper, the one that proved everything. She held it with trembling hands, and for the first time, she smiled fully. The wealthy community reacted with disbelief, some with disapproval, some with curiosity, and some with admiration. But the father no longer cared about their opinions. He saw his son happy. He saw a girl with a brilliant mind finally given a chance. And he saw a future built not on pride, but on truth. The boy and the girl continued learning together, now openly, without fear. Their friendship grew stronger, rooted in respect, kindness, and shared struggle. The father watched them and realized something he had never understood before. Real strength was not measured by wealth. Real intelligence was not measured by status. Real growth came from humility, compassion, and the courage to see value where others refused to look. And so, the mansion changed. The whispers stopped. The shame faded. The staff no longer looked down on the girl. The boy no longer felt broken. The father no longer felt blind. A future opened for all of them, shaped by a single secret that was never about test answers at all, but about seeing someone for who they truly are.